Good morning, fellow fools. That was not a put down. Good morning, fellow fools. We are here this morning as we are every Sunday because we are indeed fools for Christ. We may not think of ourselves in that way, but there are sure a lot of people in our culture, I think, who probably do. Why else, other than foolishness, would we be following or believing in a God who became one of us? God who became human? Why, other than foolishness, would we follow a man who welcomed everyone? No strings attached, no judgment, unconditionally. Why else other than foolishness? Why else other than foolishness would we believe that and follow a man who taught us how to forgive and the importance of reconciliation? Why else other than foolishness? Because forgiveness is so hard, both to offer and to receive. We hear of forgiveness happening in different situations, and we say to ourselves, I could never do that. Because to forgive and to be reconciled means also to be accountable. And we humans don't always revel in being accountable. So why do something so foolish? Why follow someone who was so willing to sacrifice himself on behalf of others? Who was willing to suffer a shameful criminal's death, painful, embarrassing, all of those things? Why would we follow someone who died that kind of death? Why would that person be so important? It's foolish. And the ultimate foolishness is why? Why would God raise that person from the dead? Why would we follow someone? Why would we try to live the life of that person for whom God did something that had never been done before? It's all way too foolish. It doesn't make sense. We can't prove it. We can't list a factual number of things that says, okay, this is how it happens, and we've been able to prove to you on by working out theories and experiments and all that stuff that this person is who we understand him to be and have been following for centuries. So why are we fools? Why are we so foolish? Why does Paul call the cross and the resurrection, why does he call that foolishness? In the early church, in the new church community in Corinth, which was probably only 4 or 5 years old, there were divisions within that community that are focused primarily around differences in understanding about who Jesus was. Again, in Greek culture, it's very philosophically based, and also it was very important who your teacher was. And the same in the Jewish tradition. Which rabbi you followed was very, very important, because there was this sense of this person has the truth. This person has the right interpretation. This person is the one that I will follow because it makes the most sense to me. The Gentiles, those who had grown up mostly in Greek families and philosophy, wanted wisdom. They wanted right knowledge. They wanted to know that what they were believing was right and appropriate. The Jews, on the other hand, had always, throughout the centuries, wanted signs from God. Tangible experiences of God's power as proof that God is indeed connected with our world. So on the one hand, you have people who want the power of knowledge, and on the other hand, people who want power in what they see and what they do. They want to understand God's power in those ways, and Paul says, I will have none of it. He says, I will have none of it. He says, has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, God decided, through the foolishness of our proclamation, through the foolishness of Paul's proclamation of the cross and resurrection, to save those who believe. It's not about signs, and it's not about wisdom. It is about Christ crucified and risen, which the Jews trip over all the time because that's not who they imagine the Messiah to be, and because it's not about wisdom that you can grab onto, which the Gentiles are looking for. It is the experience of what God chose to do for us. It was about God's action, not ours. The proclamation is foolishness because God acted and we believed. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. And Paul goes on to describe the fact that, to tell us that God does not pick the smartest people to teach. He does not pick the healthiest people to heal. He does not pick the best business people to run the treasury. By human standards, that's not what God calls us to do. God calls us to do things that God knows we can do, which may make no sense to the rest of the world, or even to the person who's called, but makes ultimate sense to God. I said at the annual meeting last week that there was one member of the vestry who had served a one-year term, both to fill out that term and because he wasn't sure if the vestry was a calling of his. And he discovered that it wasn't. How wonderful is that? That he accepted and risked this call to try it out. And he discovered that no, it's not his calling, but he also discovered in the process that he is now a more involved, a deeper, more deeply connected with the life of the community. Because he listened to a call that by instinct he never would have said yes to and had actually turned down in the past. God calls us because God knows the things that we're capable of. And that's so important for us to know, especially as we are looking ahead to what God has in store for this congregation. One of the issues, as I said in the Corinthian church, was that there had to be experts that you followed and people that you learned from. And in the church traditionally, adult learning has been understood to have to be led by people who already know a lot. Whether the clergy can teach or not, they're expected to teach because we know stuff. Okay? There's other people who have other knowledge, and we ask them to do things because they know stuff. But what Paul is saying to us is that we don't need experts. They're helpful and they're part of the picture, but we don't need them in order to become more faithful disciples, more faithful followers. And we've got a perfect example of what's happening with that in our congregation right now. As you're seeing the different adult formation opportunities that are arising here. One of them is an at-home small group Bible study that just started a week or so ago. The only people in that group are, there's 8 people, 4 couples have agreed to come together. They found some materials that they want to use to help them investigate part of the Bible they want to look at, and they're doing it themselves. On the other hand, I will ask people to come and join us for Thursday morning Bible study, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't know enough to come to Bible study." And maybe it's just the fact that they're putting them, balancing that off against the fact of that I know stuff, and that's intimidating. But it shouldn't be. We don't need experts. We need people who it may not be with a megaphone. God said. It may be a whisper in your ear. It may be a question from someone else. The power of God resides in our community, but it resides in the community because the community is called together by God's ultimate foolishness, the life, death, and resurrection of his Son. And for us to continue to share in that power and in that life, God asks us to be open and to listen and to be willing to try things, whether we think we know enough or not. So listen. Watch. You never know when God's foolishness